Our goal is to find all functions from the integers to the integers that satisfy this rather symmetric equation, given that the inputs a, b, and c sum to 0. With functional equations, a common starting point is to test simple values for the variables. Let's begin with the most trivial case where a, b, and c are all 0. Their sum is 0, so the condition holds. If we substitute these 0 values into the main equation, we are left with an expression entirely in terms of the function's value at 0. Simplifying both sides of this equation reveals a simple relationship. The left side becomes 3 times f of 0 squared, and the right becomes 6 times f of 0 squared. If we rearrange this equation to solve for f of 0, subtracting 3 times f of 0 squared from both sides leaves us with 3 times f of 0 squared equals 0. This directly implies that the function's value at 0 must be 0. So f of 0 is 0. This is the first concrete property we've discovered about our function. Next, let's see what we can learn about the function's symmetry. Consider the case where c is 0. The initial condition forces b to be equal to negative a. Let's substitute these values into the main equation. The equation now involves f of a, f of negative a, and f of 0. Since we know f of 0 is 0, all terms involving it will disappear. This leaves a much cleaner relation between f of a and f of negative a. By moving all terms to one side, a familiar structure emerges. The rearranged expression is f of a squared minus 2 times f of af of negative a plus f of negative a squared equals 0. This is recognizable as the expansion of a perfect square. Specifically, it is the square of the quantity f of a minus f of negative a. If the square of a value is 0, the value itself must be 0. This implies that f of a equals f of negative a, meaning our function must be an even function. This is a powerful constraint. Let's now rearrange the original equation to see if a deeper structure reveals itself. Moving all terms to one side gives this expression, which is reminiscent of Heron's formula for the area of a triangle. Let's view this expression as a quadratic in the term f of a. Grouping the terms this way shows the structure of a quadratic equation in ff of a. Notice that this part of the expression is itself a perfect square. We can rewrite it as the square of the quantity f of b minus f of c. This looks very closer to a perfect square involving f of a. Let's try completing the square. We add and subtract the square of half the middle term. When we expand and simplify these two squared binomials, the f of b squared and f of c squared terms cancel, leaving only negative 4 times f of bf of c. This substitution simplifies the expression beautifully. Finally, we can isolate the squared term. This reveals the core structure of our functional equation. It must hold for any a, b, c that sum to 0. The left side is a perfect square. This implies the right side must also be a perfect square, which gives us a powerful condition on the function f. This means that for any two integers b and c, the product of their function values must be a perfect square. Let's explore a simple case that arises from this condition. Let's fix one of the integers, c, to be 1. The condition implies that f of b times f of 1 must always be a perfect square. What if f of 1 happens to be 0? If ff of 1 is 0, the condition holds trivially, since 0 is a perfect square. We can choose b equals 1 and any integer x for a. Then c must be negative x minus 1. This gives us the square of f of x minus f of 1 minus f of negative x minus 1 equals 4 times by f of 1f of negative x minus 1. Since we assumed f of 1 is 0, these terms disappear. This simplifies to the square of f of x minus f of negative x minus 1 equals 0. And since f is an even function, f of negative x minus 1 is the same as f of x plus 1. This means f of x equals f of x plus 1. The function is periodic with period 1. A function with a period of 1 must have the same value for all integer inputs. Since f of 0 is 0, the function must be 0 everywhere. This gives us our first solution, the function that is 0 for all integers. A quick check shows that 0 equals 0, so it works. Now, let's consider the more interesting case where the function is not identically 0, and build a more rigorous proof. Recall our condition. This implies that all function values must have the same square-free part. Therefore, f of x must be of the form d times g of x squared, where d is a square-free integer and g is some function to the integers. As we derived before, this leads to the relation g of a squared equals g of b plus or minus g of c, all squared. Taking the square root gives us that the absolute value of g of a must be the absolute value of g of b plus or minus g of c. Let's choose specific values to build a recurrence. Let b equal n and c equal 1. Then a must be negative n minus 1. Substituting these into our relation for g gives us a recurrence. We get the absolute value of g of negative n minus 1 equals the absolute value of g of n plus or minus g of 1. Since ff is even, g squared must be even, which means the absolute value of g must also be an even function. Thus, the absolute value of g of negative n minus 1 is the same as the absolute value of g of n plus 1. This gives us a recurrence relation for the absolute values of g. Let's define g of 1 to be some integer k. We already know g of 0 is 0. Let's find the value of g of 2. For n equals 1, the absolute value of g of 2 is the absolute value of k plus or minus k. This means the absolute value of g of 2 is either 2 times the absolute value of k or 0. Let's use another combination to see if we can resolve this ambiguity. Let a be 2 and b and c be negative 1. Plugging this into our relation for g. This gives the same result and so does not yet resolve the ambiguity. Let's proceed by induction. Assume that the absolute value of g of n is the absolute value of k times n for some integer n. Our recurrence relation connects g of n plus 1 to g of n. The absolute value of g of n plus 1 must be the absolute value of the absolute value of kn plus or minus k, which is the absolute value of k times the quantity n plus or minus 1. This implies that at each step, we are either adding or subtracting k. The simplest function that satisfies this property is g of n equals k times n for all n. Let's verify this choice. If g of n equals k and our relation becomes the absolute value of a equals the absolute value of b plus or minus c. And since a equals negative b plus c, we can always choose the plus sign, for which the equality holds. So g of n equals kn is a valid solution for g. Substituting this back into our form for f, we get that f of x is d times the square of kx. Since d and k are arbitrary integer constants, their product d chi squared is just another arbitrary integer constant. So our second family of solutions is f of x equals c times x squared for any integer c. Now, let's verify this general solution. We need to check if f of x equals cx squared satisfies the original equation for any integer c. Substituting this form into the equation gives us this expression. We can factor out c squared from every term on both sides. Doing so leaves us with c squared times the sum of fourth powers on the left, and 2c squared times the sum of the products of squares on the right. Assuming c is not 0, we can cancel the c squared term from both sides, and we are left with this identity. This is a known algebraic identity. For any three numbers that sum to 0, the sum of their fourth powers is twice the sum of the products of their squares. Since this identity is true, our solution is correct. Thus, we have rigorously verified our second family of solutions. Let's summarize our findings. The problem has two families of solutions, the trivial zero function and the quadratic functions f of x equals c times x squared for any integer c. If you enjoyed this solution, please consider liking the video and subscribing for more mathematical explorations. Your support helps a lot. Thank you.